Thank you very much. I want first to thank Dean Elwood, and I hope to be as wise as he was to retire in due time and not wait to be kicked from office. And at the same time, I want to thank very much, with all my heart, Ricardo Hausmann. Although I have to clarify two details on about his introduction. One, that I was not an Olympic basketball player. I was just a tall Albanian and was obliged to play basketball because at that time, being tall in Albania was not very, very common. And secondly, it's not thanks to Soros Foundation that we got together. It's true that Elaine made a lot of efforts, but at that time, Professor Hausmann was already dealing with a depressing opposition in Venezuela and didn't want to deal with another depressing opposition in Albania. So I had to win elections to get to know him. Although I fought hard to get to know him before. So one of the reasons I am very happy to have won elections is to have get to know one of the most remarkable men I have met in my life, and a driving force for all of us in inspiring us to not give up in front of IMF, World Bank, EU, and all the company. So it's a big pleasure for me to address you today, and not only because of such an esteemed audience, but also because it comes, as it was said, as a result of what I regard as an opportunity of life for us and as an exemplary collaboration between Harvard University and a foreign government. The cooperation in which we have been engaged with the Center for International Development here at Harvard has been something absolutely unique and very special and deeply result-oriented, which is very important for Albania and I believe for all the Southeast European region. And to explain why so, let me go back to my country's history without wanting to overwhelm you, because history in our part of the world is really overwhelming. It can even affect a football match. So it was 1990 in Albania when the first important blow was given to the communist dictatorship. Mass movement and students' movement had pushed finally the single party's leadership to accept and legalize other parties. So Albania gained then a pluralistic system, and in 1992, for the first time, got to have a democratically elected government. People could be finally represented by political forces others than the so-called Labour Party, nothing to do with Tony Blair, that had ruled with an iron fist since 1945. It was symbolically the end of the dictatorship. It was symbolically the end of an era and the falling down of a system. Although, I must say, easier said than done. Certainly there was a long way to go for Albania in terms of building democratic state and state institutions, a judiciary system independent from politics, a state administration immune from corruption. And we are still struggling with all these matters, learning every day that you can change a regime in one night, but you can't change a whole society even in one generation. The difficulties establishing a market economy, replacing a national market, up until that point closed to international interaction and dominated by the state monopoly have been absolutely immense. But immense was also the desire of individuals to catch up with opportunities denied in very long years. And nevertheless, the educational system had long before the early 90s failed in responding to the necessities of a world developing in knowledge and innovation. So our country that thought to have finally rejoined the rest of the world, or better said, the West of the world, was faced with limited knowledge to build what was supposed to be our dreamed place under the sun. Democratic institutions, market economy, and a system that would be able to respond to new challenges and first and foremost to the hopes of people. It was in these conditions, and it is quite understandable that mainly the integration of the European Union, but also collaboration with Western countries like the United States, offered key incentives for all of us to don't give up and to go forward in the way of democratization and modernization. And by the way, communist dictatorship never stopped declaring the United States the greatest enemy of people's welfare, and never stopped demonizing the United States by, as a matter of fact, providing the best publicity such a regime could have done for a country. I think the United States have never had a stronger lobbying campaign, 50 years, day and night, free of charge, to transform a whole country and the whole population in the most pro-American place in the world. And I believe most pro-American than many states of the United States. Yet, since the beginnings of the pluralist regime, the relationship between Albania and Brussels, the center of the new empire, after having left behind the old empire with Moscow as a center, but also between Albania and other developed countries, including the United States, has been one of mentorship. Mentorship in building everyday democracy, mentorship in building a functional market economy, mentorship in building a legislative and institutional framework that would ensure, we were told, the viability of both economy and democracy in Albania. But after so many years, it's a moment to reflect on what can happen to a country that has lived with mentorship. And I see it as our government faced it. Finally, Albania succeeded to have thousands of laws, a legislative framework pretty much responding to Western standards. And I believe that for everyone that would try to be introduced to Albania through the library of the parliament would be quite a well-set European country. But the reality, it's quite different. And I don't want to be misunderstood. I never had the expectation that Albania would catch up with the democratic world in a few years. Whether that be 23 years already passed in Albania's transition or even more. However, we all did hope for was to use our country's immense natural resources and human resources in a less creative but much more efficient way. And I think that we did our homework in a very creative way, and I say it in the sense that during the various phases for our integration towards the EU, we submitted to Brussels all the laws that Brussels wanted. Very well-filled papers through well-founded international projects. We succeeded to prepare and to adopt quite very good laws. And let me give you just an example to not make this speech too serious. We succeeded even to have, in a certain moment, the most advanced law against discrimination and against gay discrimination. And it happened that the law was approved with full consensus, while until the law was approved, no one in the country had ever assumed his homosexuality. And when it came, the moment that someone in this Big Brother show, one of the imports from the new era, got out and said that he was gay, then we realized what a gap it was between a law that was applauded by all liberals all over Europe and the reality. The guy was not even allowed to go back to his city. And the bridge, there is a bridge that connects the city with the rest of the country, was blocked by kind of 500 men telling the witch to go back. And so for him it started kind of struggle in the woods, because nobody would come out and say, I'm with him, I support him. Or better, Hillary Clinton came out and said she supported him. American embassy came out and said they supported him. Dutch embassy supported him. Some other embassies did so, but not the legislators. Not them that have voted for this piece of legislation and have been telling this story all over Europe that, look, we maybe are behind, but there are things in which we can lead. For example, this legislation. And we were even pushing Europeans to do it. But when it came to face it, we were all hiding. So finally, all this resembled hanging beautiful curtains without changing the quality of everyday life in our home, created a totally different Albania in paper from the Albanian reality. As such, from a totally isolated country, we were finally floating in a sea of networks, but without anchoring in sustainable results. And on the other hand, we took advantage from two very natural sources of growth coming out of just the change of the system. On one hand, the remittances from immigrants that were our most important source of growth for many years, and on the other hand, the construction boom. Albanians have been deprived for many years by every type of private property. So we lived in a country in which everything was ours, but nothing was mine. In a country in which nobody could dream about having a car, about building a private house, and in a country that, being the poorest in Europe, became the place with the highest density of Mercedes right after the change. Because all Albanians, being poor or very poor, they dreamed to have a Mercedes. And what they could do better in Europe than steal Mercedes and bring them to Albania? So I will never forget German ambassador in the early 90s. The guy was totally shocked. He couldn't get it. He was told that he was going in hell, and he found himself in the paradise of Mercedes-Benz. And he was telling to everybody, I've never seen so many Mercedes all together in once, even in Germany. So, as a matter of fact, our entrance in government in June 2013 coincided with the exhaustion of this jobless model of growth. Because on one hand, the remittances of immigrants started to lower even before, because as everywhere, the second generation of immigrants start thinking more about mortgages and about life improvements where they live, and less about their relatives' home. But also because of the financial crisis that hurted badly Greece and Italy, where our biggest communities of immigrants live. And secondly, the construction boom is over. We did our best to build everywhere, in every corner, by harming a lot our nature, by making wild use of every type of resource that would serve this madness of building everywhere. And as a matter of fact, today we inherit a large stock of empty houses. So this is where Ricardo Hausmann and his team Albania entered in this endeavor. And I don't exaggerate, but I just speak truth. For us is a bless, because it was the possibility to finally meet experts that are not coming to Albania with their ultimate truths, with their perfect policy papers, with their to-do work and telling us what to do, but meeting people that in dialogue with us and together with us made possible that we started to make sense on how a new model of growth, a new model of economic development can be put in place, starting from the assumption that Albania is a rich country, rich in natural resources. And so innovation has been the watchword of our governing program. And from the history of the Balkans and our country, Albania, we have learned the hard way what Ricardo says in his very simple way, that countries are not developed, more developed or less developed because of what they have, but because of what they know. And here it starts our big struggle for the future. Henceforth, through networks and partnerships rather than through the logic of mentorship, we are working to ensure that the driving factor behind the change in our economic model is knowledge and innovation. This aim has, I think, been served very well by our collaboration with the Center for International Development, a partnership through which our government philosophy is helped to be put into practice with many innovative tools. And for example, it might seem very simple, but as every important thing, when it happens naturally, then it seems very simple. We have endorsed an incentive package for toll manufacturing that includes a totally innovative way of renting state facilities for many years, providing vocational training for employees, supporting with social security expenditures and other incentives. And we did it together with Team Albania by interacting with the actors in the field. And this package, implemented since January 2014 and shaped in close collaboration with all the actors in the sector and through a relationship of partnership with the business world is proving very successful. And let me tell you that exports related to toll manufacturing increased 26.08% for the period January-August, compared with the same period of a year before, which is huge for us and which is huge for our revenues. In order to make these results sustainable, we are creating structures that ensure its continuity and its success. And what the Dean mentioned, the black belt teams, are proving to be a very innovative solution to not be trapped in the process of a very weak public administration. And we are very, very grateful to Matt Andrews, whose failure with the World Bank to improve public administration has helped to understand how to go towards the problem by another way. And so we have proven, and we are proving, how important are these black belt teams, not only for the results they are starting to give, but also for the motivation and the sense of responsibility and of participation to a bigger aim they are giving to our people. And so people working with the black belt teams become then a driving force inside the administration, and I very much hope that become good examples for the others to create a chain effect, a value chain, as Ricardo says, but in human capital. We have established for the first time in Albanian transition period the National Economic Council, and are about to set a National Investment Council. And this council do not only operate as platforms to share and resolve major problems confronting entrepreneurs and investors, but they also serve as policy forums to ensure the viability and predictability of the investment environment, which has been a very big problem for many years and which is one of the problems we want to deal with successfully. We are currently working towards recreating a public-private partnership unit in the Ministry of Economic Development, Trade and Entrepreneurship, and the unit will put all its efforts into making sure that we materialize new projects for foreign investors, projects which will be viable from a business standpoint, and which will ensure that we create dynamic enterprises for tomorrow, not just an immediate profit for today. So during our first year in government, we have seen that through using networks of knowledge within a result-oriented and innovation-focused mindset, transformation is quite possible. And not only that, but it changes completely from the usual practice of expertise, of strategies, of reports, of studies. And by the way, Albania is a country where I think we could pretend a Guinness by just telling the number of strategies we have formulated during 20 years. Only in education, we have been so productive to have 17 national strategies in less than 20 years. Of course, in various parts of the sector. And we have been even such productive that within the same government and during the same term, two different ministers of the same party leading the education ministry have formulated two totally different national strategies on how education should go further. One was totally convinced that the Italian model was our way, and then the other one said, no, the Scottish model is what we should follow. And we ended up by having a non-model. But I think that this is not just an Albanian case. This is Our experience in Albania, but I think in the Balkans, everyone can tell this story. And knowledge is about empowerment. When I refer to empowerment, I have in mind a sociologist, André Breté's approach that empowerment is about social transformation and about common people. This is quite related to the theme of Renaissance on which we were elected last June. For the governing coalition in Albania, Renaissance meant and still means, first of all, a governing cabinet that was guided by a sense of duty, not of power, by the ambition of empowering the forces, the driving forces of the nation, and not of ensuring the continuity in power. And I have to struggle time after time in the cabinet meetings with my ministers because they are too careful, because they are sometimes too much thinking of the noise, of the reaction, of the controversy that a measure or another measure might create. And I tell them, look, we have a credit, we have to spend it, and people have given us the credit. So once nobody wants anymore to pay any interest on us, we leave. But we can't stay here and fall in the trap of being eternal. Because power has this magic of making you stupid and making you feel that you have it because God has decided so, and it would be really a sin if you leave it. No, I don't believe it. I think in our times, with all this consumption of news, of politics, of images, of faces, the time of politicians in office becomes shorter. And trying to make it longer, it drives the country really in not very refreshing paths. And in setting up the path for a new economic model and sustainable economic development, we are aware that we have to consider wisely our location at the heart of Europe, our natural resources, and important, the second youngest population of the European continent. I hate to talk about the second best, the second youngest, the second, because we had someone before that was saying that we were second after Germany in not being hurt by the crisis. But as a matter of fact, the age of our population and the inclination of our young people for foreign languages, for networking and for being able to do many things is a very big asset. And this means that we need knowledge, and we need more and more knowledge and innovation, particularly in 5 key areas: energy, finance, public policy, urbanization, and economy. And we need knowledge and innovation to modernize, and by modernizing to get rid of the endemic corruption, which is harming very much our people and which harms very much people that live in not yet well-developed countries. Because corruption is everywhere. We saw some time ago a report, EU report about corruption within EU. And in terms of numbers, it was quite shocking. And at the same time, when you see these numbers and you think about our GDP, it looks quite unfair that we are pointing the finger like, fight corruption, fight corruption, fight corruption. But what is abhorring about corruption in our country and in countries like ours is the fact that corruption affects people every day. It's not the invisible corruption that connects politics with money in a vicious and inseparable cohabitation, but is corruption as alternative of dysfunctional services. Corruption as a possibility to get faster what you need because the service is not there. Corruption as paying something to have a birth certificate without having to go 3 times, 4 times, 5 times in the same office, or having a title of property, or having a license, and so on and so further. And we strongly believe that innovation can help very much countries like ours to fulfill the gap that has been created by the natural way of progress. Because we don't need to go from typewriting machine to a second type of typewriting machine and then to fax and so on. iPhone 6 is here, iPhone 6 is immediately there. But I see it as an opportunity, as a possibility to use the best of technology to overcome problems that otherwise can't be overcome without 1 or 2 generations having to pass the hand. Energy is important, as Albania is very rich in hydro resources, and I have to say again, second in Europe after Norway. And since 1 year ago, the country is part of this trans-Adriatic pipeline that brings the gas to European markets from Azerbaijan. And this project situates Albania at the center of an important crossroad of energy with huge potential to develop collaborations that would drastically transform local communities. This is a very good example of network fulfilling multiple goals, enhancing collaboration between countries, intensifying trade, offering chances to local business, vitalizing local economies. Yet, if energy is particularly important, finance is essential, as Albania has just overcome through collaboration with the World Bank an internal debt crisis. And my speechwriter has forgot to mention Ricardo here, but he was key with his team in dealing with this debt crisis. Now it is time to reform the financial system and ensure transparency and predictability. We have started from tax services and customs, and in the later case, cooperation with a British company, the Crown Agents, has been yielding excellent results in fighting corruption and ensuring a sustainable modernization of the customs system by increasing dramatically their revenues. There is much and more to be learned from a number of different success stories around the world, plenty of examples, both good and bad. It is referring to such examples that we are sure that we do not want economic development at the expense of democracy. And we will never opt for economic prosperity at the expense of freedom. Democracy can't stand without economic development, but economic development is possible, even without democracy. But this won't be our choice, can never be our choice. And particularly due to this point of view, we see very much as an inspiring example the countries where freedom works and where economic prosperity comes as a result of freedom and democracy. And at the end, I would want to say that we lived around 50 years with a never reachable red horizon. And we were always told that we have done a lot, but there was still a lot to do. And then the horizon became blue, and we are living with this mantra, you have done a lot, but there is still a lot to do, which is EU. But for me, I believe that integration process is, for us, much more vital than the end of it. Integration process is traveling towards a destination within us, is a unique tool of modernization that can impose to societies like ours, to people like us, to Balkanic Mediterranean people, an agenda of modernization. Otherwise, without it, I could very well imagine that we could blow up in a regular basis. So, European Union is an absolutely unique driving force for us and in the region. And just imagine one thing. I'm sure any one of us, any one of you, when hear Balkans, the first thing is war, conflict, bloodshed, troubles, difficult people, strange people, crazy people, people that hate for love, that love for hate, people with whom you don't want to have to do. And this is a myth that is being created by hundreds of years of mistrust, of conflicts, of wars. And by the way, the First World War started in the Balkans 100 years ago. And this year, 2014, is the first year, the very first year since Balkans as a notion exists, without any conflicts in any border. And it's first time in history that all the leaders of the region got together around the table, not to discuss borders, but to discuss regional cooperation and to think about how we can build a common future. But this did not come because we became angels. This has a single word as a reason, which is Europe. So it's very funny because them who are in want to get out, we are out and want to get in Europe. So, but the narrative of Europe works, and I hope that it will continue to work. And I hope that Europe will not be afraid to be Europe, because if this would be the case, and if the Europe of fear we have today, that has replaced since some years the Europe of hope, will go on like this, things may go really in a very bad way. But let's not forget the European Union exists due to the need for peace and prosperity, and also to a Marshall Plan that started in '48 and focused in economical recovery, but definitely aiming beyond that. The ultimate aim was ensuring democratic values, freedoms, and the market economy that would support these. And this is where it comes again the need to remember that the peace we have in the Balkans need to be helped, need to be fed, need to be not only promoted as a magnificent political gesture, but promoted as a driving force for economic development and social development. And first and foremost through knowledge and innovation. We have been clear with the Albanian people that we cannot have a strong society without a strong economy. And we cannot have a strong economy without a strong society. And a strong society means a more democratic, a more equal society. To this end, the improvement in governance is a very important mean. In order to be able to manage better our resources, we have embarked on many reforms, and I would underline the territorial reform, which has changed dramatically the way we are organized, the state is organized. And we have passed from around 400 local units to only 61 of them. And we strongly believe that this will bring a lot of good in the direction of a sustainable economic development. It is through such a reform that we aim to open local and national networks to knowledge and innovation, so people could have the opportunity to use the potential of their own country and of their own community in order to fulfill their hopes, and why not, their dreams. All along the transition period, these 23 years in Albania, many dreams of families seeking better living conditions, equal chances, and a better future for their children have been lost in suburbs of cities, have been lost in all these spaces that have been created out of nothing in the form of housing with no networks, with no connectivity, with no school, with no kindergarten, with no public space, with no healthcare in many parts of the country, and especially on the sides of the roads. Obviously, this is not peculiar to Albania, yet our country has to address challenges of urbanization in order to unlock opportunities and potential. But I guess this is an issue for the city and innovation panel in which I'm glad to participate to this year's Global Empowerment Meeting. But just as Albanians face transformation in their local communities, as a country we also face transformations in our regional community. Because if we take our economies one by one, we are small economies, we are small markets. But the Balkans that are made of small, diverse countries, each of us tiny in size, as a group constitute a region that could play a key role in addressing issues of development, security on a global scale, and face together the latest challenges. Finally, we need to know how to use wisely our advantages, how to turn peace into prosperity, which is easier said than done, of course. And knowledge and innovation is fundamental to the entire neighborhood of nations in the Balkans that should ensure this through building wisely networks and partnerships within and beyond the region. And what is worrying so far is what is happening to the young generation, how they look like, how the new generation of Balkan European citizens will be like, based on the very weak education networks, based on a very weak social networks, based on a very weak ties that connect the region with the European Union in terms of real economy, in terms of real working together. Ricardo once told us that countries, as they modernize, do not specialize, they diversify. And this is one of the major points to have always in mind. And it's precisely from uniting in diversifying that the Balkans can empower communities and citizens to ensure sustainable development in the region. So this is a bit what I thought would be good to say here. And by saying the final word, I want to remember my grandmother, who was a very wise woman. And by the way, she was a driving force in the family because she was the only Catholic among many Orthodox. And being the only didn't stop her being the leader, because she was the only also to believe, among others that had the religion just as a heritage but not as a faith. And she learned me a lot of things, but I want to bring her best quote here, which is, "My son, a man can fail. It's okay. A man can sometimes go beyond the lines, be even arrogant. It's okay. A man can be many things, but what a man can never afford is to be boring. So I hope I was not boring, because this would really make me sad. For the rest, I'm sure that it's just a learning process, and I hope that I would know more after having worked more with Ricardo and his team. So forgive me for anything I said that was not academically convincing, and give me the time to learn more, thanks to this cooperation with Center for International Development and to these fantastic people I got to meet, and we're very happy to welcome in Albania. And I'm sure Ricardo and his people will help us to spread the word that Albania is a country where you should never go, but it's a country where you always go back. So it's always about the first time. And then no more problem. I know I have not to win elections again to have Ricardo in Albania just to come and meet me. So I am sure that this will happen, because Albania is such a place that, like my grandmother said, can't afford to be boring. So we are never boring. Thank you.